Welcome to Through the Forest. Each week we're going to review a section of Scripture to determine what the Word says about how we can be better parents. Let's get started with the weekly Word with our hosts, Jeff and Brad. Hello and welcome to Through the Forest. We are so thankful that you're here with us. And if you're watching on YouTube, you already have a glimpse of a special surprise for this episode. We have a guest host. I'm joined today by Matt Flora and not by Brett Snyder. How's it going, Matt?
Oh, it's going well. I'm a little nervous, but I'm glad to be on here today.
Yeah, we're really excited, and I think normally what I would do is I would have a guest introduce himself so that we are or herself, depending on who the guest is, and just so the listeners can kind of get to know them. But actually, we're going to do that at the end of the episode here, because after we study the scripture, we're going to bring in Matt's wife, Elizabeth, and kind of have an interview with the two of them. And so we can kind of skip out on the introduction for now and get right into the text. If I suppose if you're really interested, you can just kind of jump ahead and fast forward and watch that part first. But otherwise, we're going to kind of jump right into the text here for today's episode. We're studying through Deuteronomy chapter 2, and we're looking at the first 8 verses. And so what we're essentially looking at is the continuation of Israel and the mistakes that they made and how God delivered them even despite their mistakes, as Moses is recording and detailing the history of Israel and kind of recapping and reviewing all the things that happened in their journey out of Egypt to go to the promised land. And actually, Matt, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kick it off to you right at the start and kind of allow you get your feet wet as we begin. And so I'd love to hear your initial thoughts about our text here.
There were a couple of things that really stood out in this passage to me. It was first, the wilderness wandering was a result of the Israelites' sin. And it got me thinking, how many times do I miss out on what God's promised me or promised my life or the life of my family because of my sin or because of my continuation in that sin? And it's a reminder that sin is a slippery slope, and the devil wants nothing more than for us to be wandering around the wilderness lost. It's also a great reminder that not to wonder after sin. Sin pulls us in. We sit there and take a glance at it, and next thing we know, we're way off the track of where we didn't want to be.
Yeah, we look at even in the case of the Israelites, like it wasn't only, and this is the same as us too, like sin is never going to only affect the one who's sinning. Like it's always going to be this ripple into anyone and everyone, and the generations really felt the sting of the Israelites and their rebellion and just simply going against the Lord. And I was even taught in going through college at Liberty, one of the things they taught us was, as we were pursuing the idea of ministry is, they had us reflect on sins that we could get involved in ministry. And what they had us do, I want you to write down every single name of a person that would be affected in your life if you were involved in sinful behavior. And the list is just so long, and we just don't always think about how much our sin affects the people, especially those that are closest to us.
Another reminder I noticed in this text was a reminder that as a result of the fall, we lack everything. The Israelites, they were anxious about all the little details of their life, things that we really have no business worrying about as humans. And when we start to take a look at God's faithfulness, this passage is a great picture of God's faithfulness. Without God, we're wandering, we're lost, but with Him, we lack absolutely nothing. And it's just a great picture of how God provides in every aspect of our life.
Yeah, and I mean, I think here's the reality of when it comes to our families. We all at times are going to move into seasons of being in the wilderness. Like we're going to get in those moments, regardless of how we got there and how long it lasts. What we have is a choice with how we're going to treat that time. Like what is that time going to look like in our family? Because the times of wilderness that we experience, again, we're it's not isolated in just our experiences. Like it's felt by everyone in the family. We're kind of approaching a little bit of a milestone event in our family. I mean, years ago, we were kind of in one of the wilderness points in our life, and we had this date. I can remember it. It's very clear. It's in early June, and we got just some disappointing news in the season of being in the wilderness. We got even more bad news, and so it kind of put some confusion into our hearts. And like, God, what is it that you're doing? I don't understand how you're working and moving in this time. And it's funny because looking back on that season now, we kind of know exactly what God was doing. Shortly after that, it's really the events that kind of pushed us to be where we are today, to live in this area, to serve at this church. And we really have been experiencing God's blessings since then. And so when we think about what we choose to do in our family, we kind of acknowledge it. In a few weeks, what I want to do is I want to really celebrate with our kids this time, this kind of anniversary of this big milestone moment that our family had. And I want our kids to be asking it like, well, why are we celebrating this? Kind of like a random day. It seems kind of a weird opportunity to celebrate. And I want to be like, hey, listen, you know why we're celebrating? We're celebrating the fact that God is faithful to us. And I'm going to detail, hey, here's some of the story that happened so long ago that they don't remember. Like my youngest wasn't even alive yet, and the older two were too young to even remember some of the things that we as a family experienced. They were part of it, even though they were still so young. And this passage is like you alluded to earlier and mentioned, it's all about God's faithfulness. Moses is writing this as a recap of what God has done through his people. And he, throughout the text, we looked at this last week, he's willing to admit his own failures and the failures of his people. But throughout all of that, God was faithful. So Matt, when you read about God's faithfulness in this passage that we're kind of hitting heavy on here, what kind of comes to mind?
Well, I think it's just proof that we need him. It not only proves that that there's more to it than we just need him, but his faithfulness is actually a cause to push us closer to him and push us into a deeper faith in him. So, we face challenges. You mentioned not knowing what tomorrow may hold, or what his plan is in these circumstances or challenges that you're going through. But those are serious opportunities for you to just rely on him, and see what his faithful message is going to be in the next steps of your life. And, it's a reminder that he's going to be with you every step of the way. He's faithful because he knows us, right? John talked about Sunday. He's faithful because he said he would be. He promised to be faithful to us, and no circumstance that we face in life is a surprise to him. And I can think of countless things in my life where he's been faithful, but I would say the number one moment that I've seen his faithfulness is when he called me out of the darkness into a relationship with him. And And it's a good reminder that his faithfulness, it's not just limited to believers. He showed us on the cross that his faithfulness applies to everyone, and with that, he promised that no one would ever lack anything ever again. And it's just it kind of blows my mind when you go through these seasons of struggle or challenge, and you get through it and you get on the other side. Like you mentioned, you look back and you can just see God's hand on every step along the way, and that's really what stands out to me.
And I think there's if you're listening and maybe kind of experiencing that and going through a little bit of the wilderness journey in this moment, there's a verse of comfort in this section of Deuteronomy, and I want to read it to you all because um I know that most of you, if not all of you, are just kind of listening along, not reading the text with us, and that's the design here. But so I want to read the verse for you, and because it might be exactly what you need to hear. It's verse 7, and we reread, "For the Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hands. He knows you're going through this great wilderness. These 40 years, the Lord your God has been with you. You have lacked nothing." It's really easy to grumble and complain and be frustrated or upset or envious of things that you don't have. As parents, we can relate to that because we regularly hear our kids grumble about the things that they don't have. I want this. I want that. But what does that really do? It reveals our discontent with what we do have when we're only focused on what's in front of us, what's present. And Moses is looking back on these experiences and saying that God has always been faithful to us. I mean, and can't we say that as well? I mean, we certainly can. I don't know what some of you may be experiencing, but I'm certain that you can reflect in some way on God's faithfulness in the journey of your life. And so kind of in that mindset, I challenge you to do something. Okay, identify what those moments are. Like, where could you truly see God's faithfulness on a big scale? Like Matt mentioned, dying on the cross it's just a big, massive display of his faithfulness. But personally, what has God done to be faithful to you? And then once you've identified a few or a handful of ways in which God has demonstrated his faithfulness, how can I convey that to others? If we're focusing on even just our families, think about it in relation to your spouse. Think about it in relation to your kids. A lot of times, our kids don't know or don't remember or weren't part of the times that God has been faithful and shown himself faithful to us. We should be letting them know and sharing these stories of God's faithfulness. I mean, that's what Moses was challenging the Israelites to do. Hey, share this with your children, pass it on. And so we'd certainly challenge all that are listening to do the same. Identify it and then determine ways to share it. We're going to jump into a break now. When we return, we're going to bring Matt's wife, Elizabeth, into the conversation, and I'm going to ask them just a few questions. They've had some journeys in foster parenting, and just kind of curious of getting their input and feedback. And so come on back and join us. How ready are you to talk about big issues in life with your kids? I think one of the biggest conversations you can have with your kid is really by opening up a dialogue about the issue of pornography. I know every family is different, but there probably should be an initial conversation about this issue prior to your child entering the middle school years, the start of adolescence. And honestly, that may need to be even earlier, depending on how much access your child has to the internet. Attached to the show notes this week is a guide covering three different angles that you can take in trying to begin this conversation with the knowledge that it's ongoing, that it should be ongoing. And I love the analogy that they use here in this guide of playing football. And if you're familiar with the game, sometimes a player misses a tackle, not because he was unprepared, not because he was incapable, because he simply took a really bad angle and he missed it. Hopefully these simple techniques will kind of help you start and maintain these conversations with your kids. So I hope it is helpful. Now let's get back to the show. All right, well, welcome back. Like we said in the intro, we were waiting for a proper introduction, and since Elizabeth has now joined us, let's let her start and kind of just give us a little bit of a background of your family. Kind of tell us what stage of life you're in, just some of those details, so everyone can know you guys a little bit more.
We've been married, or I'm Elizabeth. We've been married about 4.5 years. We met at Rainbow, which is pretty unique. I've been there my whole life, which is almost 30 years. We still go there and we're pretty involved, and I guess people would still consider us maybe in the newlywed phase of life still. We might not think that with everything we've been through over the past 4.5 years, but yeah, our family's pretty tight knit. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, so we are currently foster parents. We've been fostering through Roanoke County for just over 3 years now. We've had 3 placements, and as of a month ago, we have a newborn in our house. So life has taken quite a turn in the past month, but we're loving every minute of it so far.
Yep.
Cool. So I think that maybe it would be really just interesting, and I think helpful for those that are listening, if maybe we even just dive into fostering, and maybe you could explain to even people like me who haven't been kind of through that journey, what has that been like what are some maybe challenges that you guys have had when you are just kind of going through the foster care system and just parenting in general?
We haven't really done a lot of parenting per se. We've had little ones that aren't really at the parenting age where you're just feeding them and changing them and things. But I would say the foster care system as a whole is a lot like parenting. You have challenges along the way. They may look different than someone who has biological children. In that the challenges of the foster system, I would say, are you don't really know what to expect from day to day. Like even a month ago, we would have never expected to have a newborn in our home. And, a lot of times you'll get a call and have minutes or, maybe an hour to decide whether you're going to accept this placement or not. And then along the way, a judge could say, hey, things are going great with their biological family. We think it's best for them to return home, which is great. And but at the same time, it's a challenge for us as we say goodbye and have our hearts broken. But I think it's a good picture of really the gospel of having something that's broken and God being able to work in a way that turns it into something that's such a blessing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. The hardest part for me is definitely the initial call. I get a lot of anxiety, like, what is this kid going to be like? Are they gonna like us? Are we gonna like them? Are we gonna click? So the first, even before we say yes, that's the time where I'm praying. Do we really want to take this kid into our home? Like, our lives are going to be changed completely. And then when they come in, as soon as they're we see their face and we hold them or hug them for the first time, it's like we couldn't imagine saying no.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties into what we were talking about in this episode, of in the moment, those challenges and what is tomorrow going to look like. We have no idea, but then tomorrow comes, and it's just a great picture of God's faithfulness through it all.
Yeah, and I'd really like to even just kind of affirm and for both you and for those listening, you talk about having kids that are so little and probably maybe it's just wording, but you most certainly are parenting those kids. I mean, I think I can understand what you're coming from, because there's not a lot of give and take. It's all give, and there's really nothing that they're but that is what the early stages of parenting. And so from I guess from kind of an outside perspective, what I would tend to view the start of your parenting journey with each kid is when you get that call. I feel like maybe that's why there's some anxiety and why there's just immediate prayer, because you pray for your kids. You're praying constantly, and so the moment that begins, I believe you're parenting in those moments. And so just to kind of maybe affirm where you guys are now, and even for those that are listening, or maybe kind of in this same journey as well. And so you talk about the challenges and all of those things, and we certainly can know and experience some of the joys. I'm sure that you're experiencing those as well. But is there anything that like you can kind of look back on and say, hey, this was a just a really difficult time and season, and kind of how God maybe used that time to sharpen and develop and deepen your faith? Can you think about on any moment that was maybe just even more difficult than others?
I mean, one of the most difficult things that I've found is the being patient in foster care, the waiting. We've been foster parents for 3 years, and we may go 6-8 months without hearing anything from social services, and no calls. And so the questioning or wondering, what's next, or what is God planning for us has been a challenge, and all of the things that we've experienced so far. We even came to a point about a couple months ago where it was time to renew our foster license, and because of those waiting times, we were really wondering, is this what God has for us to continue fostering? And after a lot of prayer and just thought and asking God what's next, we decided to go ahead and renew our license, kind of with the plans of just doing respite and helping out other foster families. But obviously, with the little one we have now, God had other plans. And it's one of those moments where we can turn around and say, okay, God, you had this under control from day one. I don't know why I doubted, but it's one of those moments of his faithfulness to continue in that journey and continue seeking what he has for us.
Yeah, and I guess kind of just to tack onto that, we hadn't had a call since really before the pandemic, and we'd done a few respites here and there, but with my mom being sick throughout the pandemic, like now she's at a place where she's independent. I don't have to spend every day with her, taking her to appointments. Those are minimal. Just looking back at the timeline that God had laid out for us, we were going to say, she started getting to be independent, and we were going to not renew our license. And then, after prayer, we decided to renew it. And then a month later, we got a call for a newborn, just as my mom's, getting to be more independent and be able to be like that grandma figure that she wants to be, and to be independent. Just God's goodness. I don't think we could have handled a newborn while my mom was sick. just the emotions of everything and the timeline that God laid out for us. It was just, it's only him, we couldn't have laid it out ourselves.
So in terms of like, we can look at foster care. And so you kind of have been, 4.5 years and about 3 of that in the foster care system. So like, as you're, just kind of navigating the first few years of marriage and kind of going through this process, maybe it can be connected to, just fostering in general, or even just removed from that. Just maybe you could talk through what's made a difference, or what's helped you guys in your marriage. Like, is there any kind of marriage advice, or just things that you've discovered along the way that have been helpful for you?
I would say for me, just my parents. I grew up in a Christian home. Both of my parents are Christians, and I've been going to Rainbow my whole life. They set a good example of parenting and Christianity.
Well, and a good example of like what a marriage should look like. And for us as newlyweds, even when we first got married, seeing them interact, and them just being faithful to the church and to ministry, and all these things that they do, is just a really good example for us, and to continue to be plugged into a local church is something that I think is really something that has helped our marriage, and for us too. One thing we've tried to do, even when we were engaged and leading up to getting married, we started doing ministry together. So, started serving in youth and serving in the nursery, and just different ways where we can serve God and really see each other's talents and gifts and things. And I think that's really helped to grow our marriage much quicker than it would be without it.
Those are really simple things. Like, anyone can really duplicate that. And so, I appreciate you sharing that, because it's maybe not something that jumps to people's mind because it's such a simple thing, but it really does help and, increase the connection that you all have. And so just kind of, as we get ready to finish up here, kind of give you an open slate to, is there kind of anything else that's on your mind that you think would be helpful to share based on your experiences, your life, your journey through fostering, or in your marriage? Anything else that maybe would be relevant to those that are listening?
Yeah, for me, I would just say, before my mom got sick, before we got our newborn foster child, I wanted things to be on my timeline. I wanted to be in control. I wanted to know, what was happening at, 1, 2, and 3 o'clock. I had to have that control. And I think now, just, I've learned recently, just let God be in control of the timeline. Let God, lead you. Don't, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, it's just a reliance on God.
Yeah, I've learned to just, let go of myself and really trust his timeline for our life.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to just share was, we talked about challenges of the foster care system and things that may shy people away from being foster parents. Foster parenting isn't for everyone, but I think the ministry of foster care is for the church, and the more the church gets involved, the more God's love can be shown to the system, to these broken families, to many hurting kids. And there are numerous ways to get involved in the foster care system. Our church does the Care Portal ministry, which I think is a great avenue for the church to give resources and material goods to families that need things to keep kids from coming into foster care, or helping out foster parents. And I've had the opportunity to bring some items to a family to keep a kid from coming into foster care, and being able to pray over a young mom and her kid is something that really touched me. And so my challenge to others would be look for those ways that you can be involved. If it's not foster parents, there are numerous other ways to get involved in the foster system. And like I said, the church being involved is going to make all the difference to a broken system.
Yeah, and this may be a more important time than ever, given just the news that's circulating and the things that are happening in the Supreme Court. And I think now is going to be more opportunity for churches and believers in Christ to step up. And so we're thankful for you both being willing to share. And if you have any questions about foster care, Matt and Elizabeth are not experts and they don't have all the answers, but I'm sure that they'd be happy to share what they do know and what they have experienced with anyone that would be interested or just hearing more information. And so we'd be happy to make that connection. So if you have any questions, let us know, ttf@rainbowforest.com, and we can help you get connected with Matt and Elizabeth. And we're really thankful for you guys joining us here today, especially Matt, you pulling double duty here and getting you in the whole episode and get full use of the guest this week. And so I appreciate that. Brett is off on vacation somewhere, and so we hope he does well, and hopefully he's back with us next week. But appreciate Matt stepping in and joining us. Some of you may know, but I'm sure others of you don't know, Matt actually has his own podcast where he's answering some just common questions about faith. And so, Matt, is there a way that people can find your podcast that you want to share?
Yeah, so my podcast is on any of the podcast networks. It's on YouTube. The name is the Notably Known Podcast. And I've gotten a little behind since I've gotten a newborn in the house, but I have some catching up to do. But hopefully some new episodes will come out soon. But
well, good.
Notably Known Podcast.
You're busy parenting. All right. You're busy parenting. And so that's okay. We understand. And so check it out. Notably Known. And I'm sure you'll learn something. There's plenty of things to catch up on. And so as for today in this episode, we're going to sign off. So thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Through the Forest. We hope it was a blessing to you. We'd be really grateful if you'd like to subscribe to our channel, and if you know someone who would be encouraged by this episode, please pass it along. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.